Hello and welcome back to Grave Whispers. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy drifting into dark, chilling tales whispered straight from the grave, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, get comfortable. Dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story 1. Whenever someone buries a body in the movies, they always get it wrong. It's always just dirt, like the ground is soft and clean and waiting for you. No rocks, no sticks, no roots, no broken glass or old concrete buried by somebody who didn't want to pay for a dumpster. Kristen's grandma had a little bulldog. When it died, I tried 3 different spots before I found a patch of earth that was actually just earth. Everywhere else, my shovel hit something hard. Chunks of old driveway, sharp stones, bits of who knows what. Some guy who lived on that lot before her probably tore up the driveway and buried the pieces instead of hauling it out, as if any of us could afford a dumpster. Still, I got it done. I always get it done when it's a job that only a man can do. That's the role I ended up with. Kristen wouldn't do it. I don't think she ever could. Sometimes I get a little hit of nostalgia, and I can almost convince myself she wasn't always this bad. Like she didn't always make everything feel like a slow leak you can't find. And then I think about the rabbit, and the nostalgia dies. If 2 male rabbits share the same space, they will fight to the death. You'd think they'd tell you that when they sell you a male rabbit. They look so harmless in the cage, soft, quiet. Little noses twitching, and then you bring them home and realize docile is just what something looks like when it hasn't decided it hates the other thing in the room. That's how Disco ended up outside. Bebop had tenure, and besides, he came from a pet store, not a flea market. Kristen talked me into it. She always did. She'd say it like it was logical. We have that fence. He's from the flea market. Probably half wild anyway. I nodded along because that's what you do when you're trying to keep the peace. But I'm not an idiot. I know where rabbits sit on the food chain. A few times, I almost got her to talk about a better solution. Rehoming. Giving him away. Anything other than leaving a rabbit out behind a fence like the world outside our yard was the same world as a living room. But then the sunlight would hit a certain spot on the living room floor and the bottle would come out and the conversation would be over. I remember thinking it had been a while since I'd last seen Disco. Not long, but long enough that my brain started making excuses for it. He's hiding. He's fine. He'll come out when he's hungry. But even then, I think I already knew what I'd find. I just didn't know where. He was a couple feet in front of the window by the kitchen sink. He used to freeze up when you got close, so for a second I let myself pretend. Still alive, just stiff. Just puffed up a little, like he was sleeping wrong. Then I saw his skull, white, clean in places where it shouldn't have been, like the sun had bleached it. His floppy brown ears were half attached, and when I moved him, they sloughed off. Not all at once, in pieces, along with parts of his face. The bugs are bad in this part of the state. People talk about mosquitoes and palmetto bugs, but it's the other ones that do the real work. The ones you don't notice until something dies and then they show up like they were invited. There were a lot of rocks in the ground that day. It was miserable, even before the rain started. Mud gets heavy fast. The shovel sticks. The dirt clings. The hole fills with water if you stop too long. That night, Kristen brought home sake, and we watched Howell's moving castle. I can't tell you how it ended. Not because I didn't like it. Because my brain was somewhere else, stuck on white bone and the sound of dirt landing on a small body. Then there was the time I had to use up my PTO. I got really good at digging holes during that staycation. I bet you think we started a garden. I bet you think Kristen got some new idea, some cute project she was going to get bored of in 3 weeks. No. It was the cat. A skanky little calico that was always getting out. We kept saying we'd get her fixed, but it always seemed to be 5 o'clock when we remembered. And by then, Kristen would already be drifting toward the first drink, like it was a magnet. I didn't have any plans for my days off, but I sure as hell didn't plan on burying a litter of kittens. I read somewhere the first litter usually doesn't make it anyway. People say it like it's nature, like it's normal, but I don't think it's supposed to go the way it did. The mom had fleas. We tried to get rid of them. We scrubbed and combed, but it wasn't a few fleas. It was an infestation. For every kitten there were hundreds, swarming, crawling under eyelids, into nostrils, in places that felt impossible to think about without getting nauseous. We did what we could, and it became obvious fast that the baths were a mistake. We didn't get the fleas off enough to matter, and we couldn't get the kittens dry quickly enough. They were tiny and cold, fragile in the way newborn things are fragile, like they're barely anchored to life. Sometimes I try to imagine what it felt like for them. All those little mouths, all that draining, all that itching and biting and helplessness. They were so cold. I dug a hole every day that week, one hole for each kitten that faded. Each morning I'd check the litter before Kristen could see them and figure out which ones had stopped being living things and had become just things. The holes didn't have to be deep. They didn't take up much space. But it was work, and it was work that had to be done by somebody. It's funny how people divide labor when they live together. Laundry was her job. Dishes were mine. Taking the trash out was obviously a man's job, but no one told me the trash job also included monitoring the lid. Kristen kept leaving it open, like I wouldn't notice, like I wouldn't see what she was doing when I hauled the bags out, stashing evidence, like I wasn't the one who had to deal with the consequences. I didn't even blame the opossum at first. It was just doing what an opossum does. If we had real trash service in the park, I wouldn't have had to handle it like this. But we didn't. So I had to haul everything bag by bag in the bed of my Dodge to the dump whenever I had a day off. When the nocturnal raider tore through the bags, all the trash settled into the bottom of the can and cooked there. Heat and rot and time turning it into sludge. By the time I could make the dump run, it was a maggoty mound of slimy gray filth that smelled like digging up a grave. Kristen would never understand. She'd always been a little queasy. I couldn't get her within 50 feet of that can, even if I wanted to. That morning, I went out expecting the can to be empty. I lifted the lid and jumped when I heard claws scrambling against metal. The opossum was inside, and now it couldn't get out because the trash was gone, and the sides were too slick. It thrashed, panicked, then froze. Plain dead. I tried to scare it off. I tried to wave it away, to make it move, to make it climb out somehow. But they don't run when they're scared. They do that thing where they fold up and pretend nothing can reach them. It annoyed me more than it should have. It felt like it was mocking me, like it was daring me to deal with it. And I kept thinking about the smell. I kept thinking, I can't do this again. I can't have it rip the trash apart. I can't have the bottom of that can turn into a rot pit again. I can't keep being the person who cleans up everything no one else wants to look at. Man's the only animal cruel enough to kill something that's already pretending to be dead, I thought. And that thought didn't stop my hand from reaching behind the door where we kept the aluminum bat. It sounded like cracking a giant knuckle. One solid hit, and the opossum jerked, swiping at its own head like it could push away panic. One more heavy pop put it out of its misery. I hosed the bat off and put it back where it belonged. Then I dug another hole. By that point, I was a pro. After that night, it didn't really matter if Kristen left the lid open. My job was done. The opossum wouldn't be coming back. Maybe I should be fair about her, considering what happened later. Maybe I should write her like she's a whole person, instead of a problem that stumbled into my life. But I love her. That's the messed up part. I wouldn't be down here if I didn't. It wasn't all bad. St. Augustine was a highlight. Even if it was too cold to get in the water, we found other ways to stay warm. A few weeks later, we had to make a doctor's appointment. And then it was the happiest 9 months of our relationship. She didn't stop drinking entirely, but she slowed down. She kept trying to work it into conversation, like she was negotiating with me and herself at the same time. Actually, now they say it's okay to have one drink, one little glass of red wine. I could tell the difference anyway. Suddenly, we had money left in the bank account. Even if I ignored how cranky she was, the statement told the truth. Neither of us dared to say it out loud, like talking about it would jinx it. I even let myself fantasize. New life, new habits, a version of us that wasn't always scraping by, but a new life with old habits can't hold. We named her Crystal, spelled with a K to honor her mother. It felt like a good name, like something bright, like a promise. If I could have seen how it would end, I would have named her after anyone else. She was a Valentine's baby, the 13th. People joked about it like the number mattered, but I took it as a sign. I thought she was a gift. And for a little while, it actually felt like it. For 4 weeks, with my paternity leave, we were normal. Just normal. The kind of normal people don't even notice until it's gone. I felt like I'd been holding my breath since I met Kristen, and with the baby in the house, I could finally breathe. Then the paychecks started getting thin. At first, I told myself it was diapers, formula. Baby stuff you don't realize adds up until you're living it. But then Kristen applied for WIC, and I still ended up standing in line at Amscot, and I started paying attention again. The old unease crawled back in, the sense that I was missing something I didn't want to name. I should have been off the day it happened. I was off until they called me in. My phone rang, and I could barely understand what they were saying through the noise on their end. I only caught a couple words, but they were enough. Mouse, office, squeals, screams. It was a job only I could handle. I wouldn't say I enjoyed it, but I did what had to be done. That's the story of my life. I trapped it in a dustpan, carried it out back, and tried to pretend I was doing something else. Something harmless. Something simple. In the quiet of an alley, a mouse can be surprisingly loud, especially when it's the last thing it ever does. I don't know what Crystal's last sound was, but I think it was probably a lot like that sound. While I was doing a job that only a man could do, Kristen went out to get diapers. The sports bar in the plaza was new, only a couple months into their lease. She'd probably been looking at it every time we drove past, just waiting for an excuse that sounded responsible. She told me she left the air on. And I believe her. Not because I think she was thinking romantically about keeping the house comfortable for the baby. I believe her because she didn't know about the shutoff. The key was in her purse the whole time. It was supposed to be a safety feature for carbon monoxide. It was supposed to save lives. When I got home and they were gone, I assumed she'd gone thrifting. That's how bad denial is. It can build a whole story in your brain and decorate it so you don't have to see what's in front of you. I expected the old kind of bad. A fight, a lie, a drunk argument. I didn't expect this. I smelled the booze on her through the phone. I thought she was asking me to cook for the baby, but part of me knew I was forcing that word for her into the sentence because it was the only way I could stay functional. I can only see snapshots now. Eyes that would never close. A fly landing where it shouldn't have, taking liberties with something that couldn't react. A once living thing that was now just a thing. It would be easy to hate Kristen. A part of me does, but she wasn't the only thing lying in wait. That's the other truth people don't like. Sometimes the worst thing happens because everything lined up to allow it. Because there were too many small failures stacked on top of each other. Because love can make you ignore danger until it becomes your house. So here I am. It looks like I have another hole to dig. It doesn't have to be a big hole. The remains of angels are small, light. Like they were never meant to stay in the world very long. But maybe I'll make this hole a little longer, a little wider. Maybe I'll find a patch of earth that's just earth. Maybe my work isn't over. Maybe there's one more job to do. Story 2. Rocky hit snooze on the GE clock radio the way he always did, like it was a reflex more than a choice. It had been his wake-up call for as long as he could remember, and the routine was so deep in him that some mornings he'd smack the button a second before the alarm even started, like his body could feel the shrill scream coming. Calling it a routine was generous, though. His mornings weren't really a routine. They were survival. Rocky loved sleep, but not because it rested him. He loved it for the first few seconds after waking up. That tiny shift in his brain where he forgot who he was. Those few seconds felt like mercy. Then his eyes would open all the way, and he'd remember. He'd wipe at the crust in the corners of his eyes, but it never really went away. Brush on the pearly yellows. Swipe in the pits. Then out the door, pretending the day was just another day. His dad never taught him to floss. His dad had been gainfully employed as a sanitation engineer, which kept the lights on. But it also meant lights out early, before Rocky ever felt ready to call it a day. Sanitation engineers had to wake up at what Rocky called "fuck my life o'clock," and even after years, he never got used to it. That GE clock radio didn't sound like wake up anymore. It sounded like wake up, loser, and Rocky heard it that way every morning. On the way to the depot, he stopped at the Quick Mart that stayed open 24 hours. He didn't need gas, but he needed fuel. The trash wasn't going anywhere. Neither was he. "Hey, Rocky, my man. How are you, friend?" Raj called from behind the counter. He always said friend like he meant it, even if he said it to everyone. "We got some new Lost Marys in, man. Check 'em out." "You know I'm a Cherry Straz loyalist," Rocky said. "When you want to get more of them in?" "We get 'em all the time," Raj said with a shrug. "Just not when you come in, I guess." Raj was from Varanasi. He told Rocky once, in a quiet moment between customers, that he used to swim with his cousins in the Ganges. He didn't talk about it often, but Rocky could tell he missed home more than he admitted. For some reason, Rocky's face seemed to bring it out of him. Like seeing Rocky made him remember what it felt like to be the odd one out somewhere. Rocky grabbed his breakfast, 3 Slim Jims and a Monster. He stared at the vape display for a second, then chose Sakura Berry Peach because it was there, and he didn't have the energy to argue with his own taste buds at 5 in the morning. Artificial fruit met artificial meat as he drove. He tuned the radio to classic rock and got the opening chords of Sky Nerd's "Gimme 3 Steps," which felt like the universe giving him a tiny reward. He hit a pothole, and something shifted in his gut, releasing a pocket of gas that had been waiting. His lips tingled from the sulfur burp, and he swallowed it back with a grimace. By the time he got to the depot, Laurent had already done the checks on the truck and was ready to get this day over with. Most of the guys were like that. Men who learned a long time ago that you don't get any dessert until you eat your Brussels sprouts. "You ready to make a paycheck, man, or what?" Laurent called. "Time to sling that stank, my man," Rocky answered. When Rocky was in school, he remembered a teacher saying, "Actually, garbage men make a lot of money." She'd said it to shut down a kid named Louis Jacobs, who was making fun of Alex Arce, the dyslexic kid struggling to read out loud. Louis had laughed and said, "Guess we know who's going to be a garbage man when he grows up." And everyone laughed until the teacher said her line. Rocky must have heard what he wanted to hear because he was the one who ended up on the back of the truck. He didn't know where Alex ended up. They weren't friends on Facebook. Some people drift out of your life so completely it feels like they were never there. Sometimes Rocky wondered if his mother would have been proud of him. Not for the job, maybe, but for the way he survived. Self-reliant, hard-working, dependable, most days. Mostly he hoped she'd be proud of his capacity to take shit. In his own brutally honest opinion, it was his best trait, and he didn't have many. Rocky knew what people saw when they looked at him. Piss-yellow hair, dry, crusted skin, a smell that seemed to cling even when he was clean. He stank even before he took the job, even as a little boy, when his dad made him take hot showers and scrub with that strong, powdery soap they kept in the kitchen instead of the bathroom. Rocky never blamed him for that. What else were you supposed to do with a kid like him? Rocky didn't know how much his parents had wanted him, how many times they'd tried before. His father was hard and stony on the inside, the kind of man who didn't say what he felt because feelings felt like weakness. But if Rocky had known anything about that man's private life, he would have known the truth. His dad had been happy the day they finally heard the news. "So, Doc," his dad asked, voice trying to sound casual, "what's the word? Boy or girl?" "It's a nephrolith," the doctor said. "Beg pardon?" his mother asked, already nervous. "Nephrolith," the doctor repeated, calm as if he was reading a grocery list. "From the Greek nephros, meaning kidney, and lithos, meaning stone. So, I'm not pregnant?" Rocky's mother asked. "Oh, no," the doctor said. "You're pregnant, all right. But that boy's half kidney stone. The conception must have been vigorous. It's not unheard of. Some physicians even prescribe intercourse for nephrolithiasis patients when nothing else has helped. Surgery is invasive. You're lucky in that way." The doctor shifted his attention to Rocky's mother, but Rocky's dad stopped listening after the word boy. His mind filled up with pictures he didn't even know he wanted until they appeared. Greasy little handprints on the driveway next to his own, a tiny fishing pole, a kid in a baseball cap trying to stand still and failing. He hadn't known how badly he wanted to be a father until that moment. He should have been paying attention. The pregnancy was not easy. Rocky's mom cried at night from the pain, and the sound haunted his father because he couldn't shake the guilt. In the last trimester, the pain was so bad she needed a wheelchair. Rocky's dad tried to take leave to care for her, but it was denied because he'd just started at the garage. Rocky never met his mother. For years he assumed it was because his dad was old-fashioned or cheap or stubborn about doctors. He was wrong. His mother had insisted on a natural birth. She distrusted hospitals the way some people distrust the government. She believed a C-section would kill her. She didn't understand that the birth itself would. People say passing a kidney stone is one of the most painful things a person can endure, second only to childbirth. Rocky's mother did both at the same time. By the time Rocky crowned, she was hemorrhaging. A surgeon, an immigrant from a village just miles from where Raj grew up, tried in vain to stitch what could be stitched. But the damage was too severe. Jagged, crystalline growths lined the baby's skin. Vessels tore. Blood wouldn't stop. Under normal circumstances, the father holds the baby while the mother rests. Rocky's dad didn't hold him. He held his wife's hand until they made him stop. Even afterward, he didn't want to touch Rocky. It hurt just to touch him. Not emotionally. Not yet. Physically. Like skin against Rocky's skin was always too sharp. "You ain't falling asleep back here, are you, buddy?" Laurent asked now, snapping Rocky back to the present as they hoisted a cube organizer into the compactor. "I could have got that myself," Rocky muttered. Yeah, Laurent said. "And if you hurt yourself on bulk trash day, first thing boss man gonna ask is where I was, and then it'll be my ass. I like my paycheck." Rocky noticed Laurent said paycheck, not job. Like it was something you endured, not something that defined you. Laurent didn't really know what he was talking about, though. Rocky never got hurt at work, but hurt liked him anyway. It followed him like a stray dog. He'd learned that early. First day of kindergarten, recess, leapfrog. Kids lined up laughing, bending over one by one. Rocky was curled at the end of the line because that's where he always ended up. Tina Juergens went first. He heard her giggle as she hopped over backs. Then the giggles paused. Rocky realized she was behind him. He became aware of himself in the way only a kid can, suddenly aware of how he smelled, how his skin felt, how different he was. He pictured the ochre crystals that covered him. He thought about how hard he'd scrubbed the night before, and how it never helped. Sometimes, when it's really quiet and he's had a couple drinks, he can still hear Tina's scream, still see the Band-Aids on her arms and legs afterward. They gave her a cushion to sit on, and she cried the rest of the day. The teacher should have stopped the game, should have made them play something that didn't involve touching. But how could she have known? She'd never had a nephrolith in her class before. Bulk trash days always ran late. Not just because of the extra oversized stuff, but because of the talking. The men on the truck could pause a conversation when LaRon drove, then pick it back up at the next house like nothing happened. It was the only time Rocky talked to someone for more than 3 sentences in a row. LaRon could tell Rocky wasn't used to conversation, so he did most of the talking. Rocky did most of the lifting. When they left the last neighborhood, a little girl waved at Rocky. She was twirling a baton in her driveway while music played from a Bluetooth speaker. The sight of it hit him in the chest so hard his eyes burned. Soon his cheeks were wet, and he was grateful he had a few minutes where LaRon couldn't see him. He didn't want anyone to think he was soft. Once he asked his dad if he could get one of those batons. His dad thought he meant the kind cops carry. Rocky tried to explain he just wanted something that took coordination. He was clumsy and moved in a stiff way, always getting snagged on corners and door frames. He admired the graceful flow of the girls on the twirling team. He knew it was for girls, but he didn't want to join a team. He just wanted to practice. His dad didn't get it. "What are you, a fag?" The words came out fast, like his dad couldn't stop them. Rocky's dad regretted it instantly, but regret doesn't unsay a thing. Rocky didn't react the way his father expected. If it cut him, he didn't show it. They sat in silence. Then Rocky turned on the TV, and neither one of them remembered what they watched. After a while, Rocky went to his room. He didn't like people around when he cried. His tears smelled like urine. "Where were you today?" LaRon asked later after they parked the truck. "What you mean?" Rocky said. "Same place I always am. Back of that damn truck." "Come on, man," LaRon said. "It ain't even 3 o'clock and we done. On bulk trash day? What's up with you?" "I'm fine." "The fuck you are," LaRon said. "New season of Dark Side of the Ring dropped Monday. I know you watched it. You ain't said a word." Rocky swallowed. I guess I'm just in my head lately. Don't worry about me." "Well, get out of your head," LaRon said. "You bumming me out." "Hey, I know what'll fix it. It's Thursday." Rocky's stomach sank. Rumors? No way. If I even think about that place, it'd feel like I got a hangover. "Yeah, but hangovers are good pain," LaRon said, smiling like he'd been waiting to say it. "Like chewing on a canker sore, you know? Besides, it's karaoke night." "LaRon, no, hell no. Come on, man. Do it for me. You know I get all choked up when you're up there. Your voice. You should be a front man in a band." Rocky did have a voice. That was the one thing that didn't feel cursed. When he sang, the room had to listen, and for a few minutes, people didn't look at his skin first. When he was in 8th grade, he tried to play his father's guitar once. He started by plucking strings. Then he tried to press them to the frets. He bore down harder and harder, pushing like force would create skill. The high E strings snapped first, then the B and the G in quick succession. It sounded like a wounded animal. His dad had to punish him, but spanking with bare hands didn't make sense on Rocky's crystalline skin. The belt didn't really hurt his hard, jagged cheeks, but it sent the message anyway. That afternoon, with time on his hands, Rocky rummaged through the boxes in his closet. Comic books his dad swore would be valuable someday. DVDs for when the internet bill was due, and he was waiting on a paycheck. Then the third box, the one he almost never opened. His dad's watch was in there. And a picture of his mother. It was a box for holding memories, the kind you don't want to look at but can't throw away. He pulled two objects out and took them into the living room where it was a little brighter. One was the baton, the cool gift his dad had given him for his 13th birthday at Hooters, after hyping it up in the car like it was going to change Rocky's life. Their waitress had been a tall redhead named Lucy. Rocky remembered noticing waitresses more each birthday. Lucy had thick thighs and a slight southern drawl, and Rocky didn't have the language yet for what he felt, only the heat of it. His dad had watched him open the gift with the careful eyes of someone who wanted to see joy. Rocky's disappointment had been obvious. "Is it the wrong brand?" his dad asked, confused and hurt. Right then, Lucy arrived with a group of waitresses and a slice of key lime pie with a candle. Rocky excused himself to the bathroom. He didn't want his father to lose his appetite. When they got home, Rocky put the baton in the closet and never touched it. The holes in the walls his father feared never happened. They both pretended Rocky had never asked. Now, years later, the baton felt strange in Rocky's hands. Too smooth, too clean, like it belonged to a different person's life. Rumors was the kind of dive bar that clung to the edge of land lease communities in the South like a barnacle. It had a pool table nobody used and sticky floors that never fully dried. Karaoke night brought in the locals and sometimes a few college kids from the nearby university. It was homecoming week, so the place was packed for a weeknight. Rocky was relieved at first. A packed room meant the sign-up sheet would be full. Then LaRon leaned in and shouted over the noise, "Perfect timing." "Timing?" Rocky yelled back. "What you mean?" "Look, man, sheet's full, I'm sorry." "Good thing I got here early and signed you up," LaRon said, grinning. "Girl up now, then some guy, then you. You singing Free Bird. You're welcome." Rocky started sweating instantly. He became fixated on the smell under his arms, the mix of onions and ammonia that always leaked out when he raised them. He closed his eyes and tried to remember that half second after his alarm, the only moment of peace he ever really had. A cocky junior who just turned 21 did a loud, sloppy rendition of Pump It Up, unbuttoning his shirt down to his stomach like he thought he was Jim Morrison. He wore aviators indoors. He spilled his beer trying to get off stage. The crowd cheered anyway. For a moment, Rocky let himself believe LaRon was messing with him. Then the host called his name. Rocky didn't close his eyes this time. He threaded through the wires, stepped around the fresh beer spill, and climbed onto the stage. He waited until the opening notes played to close his eyes, not for the lyrics on the screen because he didn't need them. He'd been carrying those words for years. The bar stayed loud at first. Then the tempo grew and something changed. People turned their heads, voices quieted, eyes shifted to the stage. Rocky's voice filled the room, and for once it wasn't just sound. It was truth. Not Leonard Skynerd's truth. Rocky's. By the end he was crying and he didn't care. He didn't open his eyes until the song was finished. When he did, he felt more eyes on him than he'd ever felt in his life. It felt like kindergarten again. Except this time nobody looked scared. He looked for Laurent in the crowd and caught someone else's eyes instead. A woman stood near the bar, smiling, eyes trembling like she was trying not to cry. Her face wasn't pretty in the way people mean when they say pretty. But her body was soft and curvy, and she looked at Rocky like she saw a person, not a problem. Rocky started working his way down from the stage. By the time he reached her, the fake Jim Morrison kid was already there, leaning in too close. "I said don't call me that," the woman snapped, voice sharp with old exhaustion. "Hey, why not?" the kid slurred. "It's a good nickname. Your name's Lucy, and you so juicy. Huh. Juicy Lucy. It's good." Normally, Rocky would avoid situations like that. He'd stay out of trouble because trouble stuck to him easily. But her eyes were still on him, and something in him tightened. "Is there a problem here?" Rocky asked. It should have sounded cool. It came out dry and brittle, like his throat was full of dust. "No problem," the kid said, lifting his hands. "No problem, my man. Hey, you got one hell of a voice." He offered his hand. Rocky hesitated, then took it. He squeezed with firm, even pressure, the way his dad had taught him when he was little. That lesson had pained his father, but he wanted his son to have pride. He wanted Rocky to carry himself like he belonged. The kid walked away, holding his beer in his left hand now, rubbing his right like it hurt. Then Rocky turned back to Lucy. He stumbled through the first few sentences, words coming in his stiff, jerky way, so Lucy did most of the talking. She told him the kids in school used to call her Juicy Lucy because of her growths. She said her mom had a cyst on her ovary, and somehow that's what got fertilized when she was conceived. She said it like it was a joke, and a wound at the same time. They talked until the bartender turned the lights on. Then they went back to Rocky's place. Aside from his father, she was the only person who'd ever seen it. The way Rocky lived. The boxes. The quiet. The shame built into the walls. Lucy's eyes landed on the baton like it was treasure. "Is that a baton?" she said, picking it up with easy familiarity. "I used to love twirling when I was a little girl." She performed a short routine right there in his living room, smiling at Rocky in an over-the-top way, like she was putting on a show just for him. Then she handed it over. Rocky hesitated, but only long enough to make himself do it. She guided his wrist, showed him how to turn it at the midpoint so the baton would keep rotating. At first he was stiff, then something loosened. The baton moved. His hands found the rhythm. For the first time in his life, his body did something graceful without fighting him. He'd never felt anything like it. Lucy stepped close, wrapped her arms around him, and kissed him. His growths pressed against hers, and there was pain, yes. But it was the good kind. Story 3. In sophomore year of high school, I practically lived in the library. I went there almost every day after school. I'd sit in the same area, read for a while, Then check out a stack of books, mostly history. I'd finish them at home before they were due back, return them, and start all over. It was routine. It was safe. It was the one place that never really changed. That's why I noticed it immediately. I opened a book I'd borrowed about medieval Europe and saw a small white sticker stuck firmly to one of the pages. At first, I thought it was one of those little price tags or a library label that got peeled off and ended up inside the book. But it wasn't. It was a prescription bottle label. It looked like someone had torn it in half and then carefully pieced it back together. The edges were worn. One side was faded down to a thin, cloudy film, like it had been peeled off and restuck more than once, but I could still read enough. At the top was the name of a pharmacy and a date. Under that were the details printed in that standard black prescription font. Theodore Hargreaves, an address underneath. Lisinopril 10 milligrams. Take 1 tablet by mouth every day. I didn't recognize the medication, but I recognized the name. Mr. Hargreaves was my history teacher. Teachers and students from my school came to this library all the time, so at first I didn't think too much of it. It could have been an accident. He could have used it as a bookmark and forgotten it. Still, I stared at it longer than I should have. It felt weird to see a teacher's private information stuck in a library book like it belonged there. I considered peeling it off, but it was stuck down so hard I worried I'd tear the page. So I left it and kept reading. The second time I saw it, I felt the same little jolt. Different history book. Another prescription label. Same name, same address, same medication. This one was deeper into the book, pressed flat on a page somewhere in the middle. I flipped back, then forward. Nothing else. Just that single sticker, like a marker. I remember thinking it was a strange thing to use as a bookmark, and stranger still that it happened again. By the 4th or 5th time, it stopped feeling like a coincidence. Always the same label, always his name, always stuck to a random page, not tucked between pages like a normal bookmark, stuck down like it was meant to stay there. I went to the library one morning to return a book, earlier than I normally went. The place was quiet and bright with that clean morning light that makes everything look harmless. I saw Mr. Hargreaves near the front desk. He looked exactly like he always did at school. Relaxed, friendly. The kind of teacher everybody liked because he made jokes without trying too hard and treated students like people. He spotted me and smiled. "Good to see you're reading," he said. We made small talk. I almost mentioned the labels right then. I almost said, "Hey, I keep finding your prescription stickers in the books. Are you leaving them in there by mistake?" But something stopped me. A feeling I didn't have words for. Like I wasn't supposed to bring it up. Like it would make something real if I said it out loud. So I just smiled, said goodbye, and left. A few afternoons later, I was back in the library again. I went to the history section, pulled a book off the shelf, and flipped it open without thinking. There it was. Mr. Hargreaves' prescription label, pressed flat on the page like it had been waiting for me. Just then, a voice snapped me out of it. "Hey, how's it going?" I looked up. My friend Matt stood in front of me, hands in his pockets. Matt didn't come to the library much. He lived farther out, near the edge of town, and he always acted like books were something you only dealt with when school forced you to. I didn't know you even knew where the library was, I said. He smirked. Ha-ha. Very funny. I was nearby. We talked for a minute, then I held the book up slightly and lowered my voice. Look at this. I keep finding Mr. Hargreaves' stickers in these books. Matt stepped closer, glanced at the page, and at first he started reading the text like he thought I meant the book itself. A messenger asked for help from nearby towns. He read aloud, then stopped. I tapped the label below the paragraph. Matt leaned in and squinted at the faded details. Huh? He said. He lives a few streets away from me. Who knew? Why would he be putting these in library books? I asked. Matt shrugged like it was nothing. Probably just uses whatever's lying around as a bookmark. That's what I thought the first time, I said. I reached for 2 more books on the shelf, ones I remembered seeing the labels in before. I didn't even have to search much. I opened the first one and found it where I expected. He keeps putting them in books, I said. Matt looked at me, amused. Maybe he's just weird. I opened another book, this one about wars. It took me a moment to locate the page, but I'd already learned the strange habit of scanning for that white rectangle. Many families were trapped as supplies began to run out. And there it was beneath the sentence. I ran my finger across it, then set the book back and opened the third one. A few managed to escape, though most were. The label was stuck right under the line again, like someone had underlined the sentence without ink. Matt glanced at it, then back at me, his smile smaller now. Okay, he said. That's a little weird. After Matt left, I sat at a table with the books spread out in front of me like I was doing homework. I stared at them and tried to make the feeling go away, the sense that I was brushing up against something I didn't understand. Then I closed the books and returned them to the shelf, telling myself it wasn't my business. A few months passed. I still spotted the labels now and then, but eventually I stopped paying attention. When you see something strange often enough, your brain either figures it out or files it away so you can keep living. I filed it away. I didn't think about it again until one afternoon at school when Matt brought it up out of nowhere. We were leaning against lockers while people pushed past us between classes. You know those labels you were talking about? He said, smirking a little. Yeah? I walk past that house all the time, he said. Ever since I found out that's his address, I can't not notice it. It's weird knowing a teacher lives that close to me. I shrugged. They have to live somewhere. Matt hesitated, eyes flicking down the hallway like he was checking who might overhear. I've heard stuff from inside a few times when I walked past, he said. My stomach tightened. What kind of stuff? He frowned like he was trying to decide if it sounded stupid. Like scraping, he said. And once I think I heard knocking, but like from inside his door. He tapped his knuckles against the locker beside him, a dull, hollow sound. We stood there for a second, the noise of the hallway suddenly feeling far away. Anyway, Matt said quickly, straightening up, probably nothing. That afternoon at the library, I couldn't stop thinking about the labels again. I went to the history section and pulled out a few books, one after another. I started looking for the stickers like I was searching for a hidden picture, and as I found them, something hit me in a way it never had before. The line of text above each sticker, it wasn't random. A messenger asked for help from nearby towns. Many families were trapped as supplies began to run out. A few managed to escape, though most were. I swallowed hard and opened 2 more books with shaking hands. Efforts to seek help from neighboring regions. A group managed to escape, though some were. The sentences weren't identical, but the meaning was, again and again, help, trapped, escape. Most didn't. My heart started racing. It felt like the library got colder, like the fluorescent lights suddenly looked too bright. I put the books down and pulled out my phone. I texted Matt before I could talk myself out of it. "Hey, can you show me where Hargreaves' house is?" By the time we got there, it was starting to get dark. The street was quiet. A couple people walked in the distance under the streetlights, but otherwise it looked like any normal neighborhood. Mr. Hargreaves' house sat halfway down the road, curtains drawn, no lights on. A house that looked empty even if you knew someone lived there. It was the same address printed on the prescription labels. Matt slowed beside me, hands in his pockets, and glanced at it. "Looks the same as it always does," he said. "What did you think you'd find?" I couldn't answer. I couldn't stop staring at the windows. "We should probably go," Matt added, "before he sees 2 teenagers from his school standing outside his house. That's going to be hard to explain." I nodded slowly. "Yeah, you're right." We turned and started walking back the way we came. We'd barely taken a few steps when Matt stopped so suddenly I almost ran into him. "What?" I asked. He didn't answer. He tilted his head like he was listening. Then I heard it too. A dull, hollow knock. Then again. Knock. Knock, knock. My skin went cold. Matt turned back toward the house, eyes fixed on the dark windows. "That's it," he said quietly. "That's what I was talking about." We stood there for a second, then neither of us said anything. We just walked back toward the house like we were being pulled. The porch creaked under our weight as we stepped onto it. The knocking came again, louder now, from somewhere behind the front window. The curtains were drawn, but they didn't meet perfectly. There was a small gap where the fabric didn't quite close. Matt leaned in slightly. "That's weird," he whispered. "I don't remember that." He pointed, and I followed his gaze. Behind the curtain, barely visible in the dimness, were wooden boards running horizontally across the window. My throat tightened. "His curtains are always closed," Matt said, frowning. "Why is there wood behind it?" Another knock. Then the curtain shifted. Something moved behind it. I sucked in a breath so sharp it hurt. "Did you see—" I started. "Yeah," Matt whispered. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. I aimed it toward the gap between curtain and board, letting the beam cut through the narrow space. The light hit something glossy. An eye. Wide open, staring straight back at us. We screamed. We stumbled backward off the porch like the house had pushed us away. Matt grabbed my arm. "What the hell?" The knocking stopped instantly. Silence, total and fast. Then we heard footsteps inside the house. Heavy footsteps moving toward the front door. We ran. Down the steps, onto the sidewalk, and down the street as fast as we could. We didn't stop until we were halfway down the block, panting, hearts pounding like they were trying to escape our ribs. My hands were shaking so hard, I could barely hold my phone. "Call them," Matt said. I called the police and told them everything. The books, the prescription labels, the strange pattern, the scraping sounds Matt had heard, the knocking, the boards, the eye behind the curtain. My voice shook so badly I kept losing my place in the story, but I forced the words out anyway. By morning, everyone knew. Mr. Hargreaves was arrested. The house was sealed off, and inside they found a girl. She was 14, only a few years younger than we were. She'd gone missing 3 years earlier from another state, hundreds of miles away. Taken and moved and hidden somewhere no one would think to search. A normal house on a quiet street. A teacher's house. She had been locked inside for 3 years. When they explained what she'd done, my stomach turned in a different way. Not fear this time. Shame. She'd been peeling prescription labels off empty bottles and boxes. Anything she could find that had his name and address, anything she could take without being noticed. She pressed them into library books he brought home and then returned. She couldn't write a message. Not on the pages. Not anywhere. Because if he saw even a mark out of place, she didn't know what he would do. So she worked with what she had. She scanned the words in the books and placed the labels under specific lines, like an underline, like a pointer. Help. Trapped. Escape. She was trying to speak through someone else's writing because it was the only safe way she had to speak at all. And it had been right there the whole time. I kept thinking about all the times I'd seen those labels, frowned, and put the books back on the shelf. All the times I'd assumed it was nothing. All the times I'd chosen the easy explanation, because the real one was too ugly to consider. If we hadn't gone to that house that day, she might have never left. She might have aged into silence there, hidden behind curtains and boards, leaving messages in borrowed books until there were no more labels left to peel. Story 4. It happened during my vacation. I wanted to get far away from people for a while, somewhere quiet where no one would bother me. I found a place that looked perfect on paper. A wide open field, a small house, and a few horses that belonged to the property. When I arrived, everything felt normal. The grass was bright green. The animals were calm. The horses stood with their heads down, chewing slowly like they had all the time in the world. The air smelled clean, the kind of clean you only get away from city roads and exhaust. I dropped my bags inside and went back out to buy some food. By the time I returned, the sun was already sinking and the sky was turning orange. I ate, stood outside for a while, and watched the last light fade. Then I went back in, after feeding the horses and making sure everything was latched the way it should be. That night was silent. Not peaceful silence. Not country quiet. It was too silent, like the place was holding its breath. I told myself I was just not used to it. Cities always have noise. Even at 3 a.m, there's a car, a siren, a neighbor walking around. Out there, you can hear your own thoughts too clearly. I forced myself to sleep. The next morning was normal. Same routine. Coffee, food, checking the horses. Nothing strange. The day passed the way I'd hoped it would. The problem started on the second night. I woke up thirsty, my mouth dry. I grabbed my lamp and walked into the kitchen to get water. I don't know why, but on the way back I decided to check on the horses. They seemed off. Not panicking, not wild, just wrong enough that I noticed it. Their bodies were tense, their heads angled in a way that made it look like they were listening to something I couldn't hear. One of them stamped the ground once hard, like it was annoyed or nervous. I thought maybe they needed water, so I went outside with a bucket. That's when I saw it. A silhouette under the moonlight, standing at the edge of the field where the light didn't fully reach. At first, I thought it was a neighbor, someone checking on the property, someone who didn't expect a guest to be there. I lifted my lamp a little and called out, "Do you need something?" No response. It just stood there perfectly still, like it hadn't heard me or didn't care. Then it moved. Slowly, it started walking backward. Not turning around, not stepping away normally. It backed up into the darkness like it didn't need to see where it was going. And then it was gone, swallowed by the shadows. I stood there staring for a long moment with the bucket in my hand, trying to force a normal explanation into my head. Maybe someone playing a joke. Maybe someone drunk. Maybe my lamp had made a weird shadow. I went back inside and tried to sleep. On the third night, the horses were different. Not just tense, restless, nervous. They shifted their weight constantly. They blew air hard through their noses. They moved like they wanted to run but didn't know where to run. One of them kept pulling at the rope like it wanted to break free. And then I saw the silhouette again. This time it was closer, standing near one of the horses, just inside the edge of the yard where the moonlight caught it. It looked like a man, tall, wearing a hat, still like it had been placed there. I felt anger flare up because whatever this was, it was messing with my animals. I grabbed a machete from inside, came back out, and shouted that it wasn't the time to be playing around. It ignored me. No reaction. No turning of the head. Nothing that a real person would do when someone yells at them with a blade in their hand. I thought it might attack the horse or attack me, so without thinking, I threw the machete. It hit the ground with a loud metallic sound and bounced once in the dirt. That's when the silhouette moved. But not like a person. It dropped down onto all fours. The motion was too smooth, too quick, like it didn't have to struggle with joints or balance the way a human body does. And then it started moving toward me on all fours, fast and low. My stomach turned cold. I snatched the machete off the ground and backed up, yelling, "Stop messing around!" It froze. For a moment, it really did feel like it heard me, like it was considering me, like it was deciding whether I mattered. Then it turned away and ran. Still on all fours, it sprinted into the dark. And in the distance, just before it disappeared completely, I saw it stand up again and walk normally, like it was switching forms because it didn't care if I saw. That's when I knew something was wrong. The next day, I moved the horses closer to the house. I told myself they'd be safer near the light, near the walls, near me. I checked the locks twice. I kept the machete within reach. I tried to act like I was in control. For a few nights after that, everything seemed normal again. Too normal. The horses calmed down. The field looked peaceful. The silence returned to being just silence. I started thinking maybe it had been my mind playing tricks. Maybe exhaustion. Maybe I'd scared myself and the horses picked up on it. Then one night I went outside to give them water. They were restless again, worse than before. Their bodies were tight, heads jerking, eyes wide in the dim light. One of them let out a sound I'd never heard from a horse before. Not a normal whinny, more like a warning. And then I saw it again. The man with the hat. Only this time he wasn't standing. He was already on all fours, crouched low in the grass like something waiting. I felt my voice shake as I yelled, I'm calling the police if you don't stop. That's when it reacted. It lifted its head and looked at me, and I saw its eyes clearly for the first time. They were red, not bloodshot, not light reflecting. Red in a way that looked like it came from inside, too red, like coals. It moved closer. That's when the thought landed in my head like a weight. That isn't a man. The shape was close enough now that I could see how wrong the movement was. The way the limbs bent, the way the back shifted, the way it held itself like it could switch between walking and crawling whenever it wanted. It turned its head toward one of the horses. I didn't know what it planned to do, but my body moved before my mind could. I ran toward it and reached up and yanked the hat off its head. It made a sound that wasn't a shout, wasn't a growl, something between both. It got angry. And then it jumped at me. The last thing I remember clearly is a hard ooter to the back of my head, so strong it erased everything after it. When I woke up, it was daylight. My head hurt. My body hurt. When I tried to sit up, I felt bruises and marks along my arms and ribs, like I'd been grabbed, like something had held me down. I checked my skin and found scratches that didn't look like I'd done them to myself. Outside, the horses were calm again. Too calm. They stood quietly as if nothing had happened. But when I looked into their eyes, something about them felt darker. Not literally, not like the color changed. Darker like the light in them had shifted. Like the fear had drained out because the danger was finished. Because whatever it was came for something, took what it wanted, and left. And the worst part wasn't the bruises on my body. The worst part was the feeling that it didn't just scare us. It marked us, me and the horses, like we'd been claimed, like we'd been counted and chosen, and now it knew exactly where to find us again whenever it wanted. I left after that. I didn't finish the vacation. I didn't pack slowly. I grabbed my things and got out while the sun was still up, because I couldn't stand the idea of being there when night came back. I don't know what it was. I don't know what it wanted. I don't even know if it was alone. But I learned something out there that I can't unlearn. Not everything in the countryside is human. Some things just pretend to be. Story 5. June. June, I'm sorry. Her little feet tore through the brush faster than mine. She stayed just out of reach, always a few steps ahead like she knew exactly where to go, and I didn't. The dark thickened between the trees and the snow started falling harder, swallowing her up until the only proof she was still there were the tiny bare footprints I chased. At first they were pale dents in the white. Then they became smears of light red, the shape of her feet stamped into the snow like pressed petals. June! I'm sorry, okay? I shouted, my throat burning. I'm sorry. I won't yell at you again, okay? Just stop. I ran harder, arms pumping, reaching out like if I stretched enough I could hook her coat and pull her back. But she sped up too, faster than an 8-year-old should have been able to in snow, barefoot in the dark. My foot slipped. I slammed into a tree trunk so hard the world flashed white. The bark splintered into my face. Warmth spread over my cheek as I fell into the snow, grinding my teeth, cursing, dazed and angry, and suddenly painfully aware of how cold it was. She must have been colder. I sucked air back into my chest and forced myself up again, groaning as my body argued with me. I kept going, stumbling after the red prints, telling myself I couldn't stop because if I stopped, I'd lose her. Her crying grew fainter. then distant. Then it echoed. Echoed. That single detail made my stomach drop. Forest sound doesn't echo like that. Not like a hallway. Not like a tunnel. My feet slid to a stop, not on snow, but on bare rock, concrete, and ice. I lost my footing immediately and went down again, shoulder and head slamming into the ground. My vision burst into black and white spots. Through the spinning, I caught one last flicker of her, shine in her eye, the turn of her hair, as she slipped away from me again. And between us, right there where the trees thinned into nothing, sat something that didn't belong. A shrine. An old mossy wooden box rested on top of a decayed table. Broken ceramic pieces were scattered around it like someone had smashed offerings in anger. Molded fruit sat in the snow, soft and collapsed, still clinging to its shape even as it rotted. Beyond the table was a dark, man-made tunnel made of concrete, snaking underground into nothing. It was tall enough for a child to run through, only tall enough for me to crawl. Yellow police tape hung in strips like dirty ribbons, flapping and twisting in the cold wind. Most of it was torn, and the writing on it looked wrong, like it wasn't in any language I recognized, just symbols broken into pieces. Some of the tape wrapped tight around the wooden box, sealing it shut. I called June's name again, apologized again, and used the table as support to pull myself off the ice. One of the legs cracked under my weight. The table collapsed. The whole shrine scattered across the ground in a burst of rotten fruit and ceramic shards. And the box broke. Not like old wood splitting. It crumbled like it had been hollowed out. Something black spilled from inside, thick tar that oozed into the snow and ice. The moment it touched, the ice started to melt, hissing quietly. The smell hit me a beat later, so foul my stomach lurched. It wasn't just rot. It was chemical and sweet and dead all at once. The tar bubbled as it ate into the ice, and in the black muck I saw clumps of hair and something else. Teeth. Or something that looked like teeth. I gagged, swallowing bile, eyes watering in the cold. Then I heard her again, a small whimper from inside the tunnel, muffled by the concrete. I dropped onto my knees and palms and crawled in after her. I didn't need a map. There was only one way forward, only one direction she could have gone. I remembered my parents warning me about this place when I was a kid. Don't go near it. Don't play there. Don't even look at it too long. I never understood why. Now I did. I wondered how often June had come here. I wondered if those ribbons had been torn tonight, or if they'd been torn for a long time. I wondered if I'd been blind on purpose, if my mind had been protecting me by not seeing what was under our town. As I crawled deeper, I felt something warm and wet on my hands. At first I thought it was blood from my scraped palms, but it wasn't just mine. It was too much. It slicked the rock as if the tunnel itself had been bleeding. I arched my neck, trying to see shapes in the dark ahead. June, where are... Fuck. My phone rang. The sudden sound made me jump, and I slammed my skull into the sharp rock above me. Stars exploded in my vision. I bit down on a shout. My hands fumbled down my legs until I found my phone, and I clicked it off without even looking at the screen. June. Honey, come here. I didn't mean it. My voice echoed back at me. Not once. Twice. Like the tunnel liked my words and wanted to keep them. Beyond the echo, I heard her whimper again. I pushed my hands forward and felt solid stone. No gap. No opening. I froze, confused, then moved my hand to the right and found the turn. I didn't remember there being a turn. The darkness swallowed everything past my reach. I grabbed my phone again, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it down the curve. The beam caught her for a split second. Her hair, her small shoulders, bare feet flashing white and red. Then she disappeared around another bend. I shouted her name louder, my patience cracking, fear turning into something sharp. I crawled faster, scraping my knees, dragging my palms over rough stone. The floor changed. Shattered glass and ceramic began to dig into my hands and knees. It tore into my jeans, and when the fabric gave way, it cut my skin. The deeper I went, the more shards there were, scattered everywhere like the tunnel had once been filled with things that had all been broken on purpose. Old vases, urns, pieces of bowls. Mold and moss clung to them, and something else, too, something that still released faint vapors into the cold cave air, like the objects weren't fully dead. My phone rang again. For a second, the light from the screen blinded me, bright against darkness. I cursed and declined it again. My neighbor. The fourth missed call since I'd started chasing June. This time I could see her clearly. She was only a couple of dozen feet ahead, running now, her bare feet stepping on broken pieces, shattering them underfoot. She should have been screaming from pain. She should have been slowing down. But she kept going, slipping through shadows like the tunnel wanted her to stay hidden. "June," I shouted. "Honey, stop. Don't. Just stay still for me." Blood marked her path, dark red drops across the ground. It mixed with the black tar smear I'd tracked in, and then did something I couldn't understand. The two colors seemed to pull toward each other, to twist, to curl into the shadows along the walls like smoke learning how to crawl. The tunnel started to open up. The ceiling rose slowly until I could straighten my back, then stand. The moment I could stand, I ran. Cautious at first because the ground was still littered with sharp pieces, then faster when I saw her turn another corner. My fingers brushed her hair. I was close. I rounded the corner and stopped so suddenly my lungs seized. My phone light hit a door. A house door. Old wood, worn brown, a frame like something you'd see on a farmhouse. It was wedged under the earth as if a whole house had been swallowed by the mountain. The door was cracked sideways through the middle, like the weight of the ground above was slowly splitting it apart. The cave walls bottlenecked tight around it so there was barely room on either side. Yellow tape was wrapped around the door, too. Tight, layered, covered in the same strange writing. The symbols seemed to whisper in my head, not with meaning, but with pressure, like distant static and thunder pressed against my thoughts. Behind the door, I heard breathing. June's breathing, fast and heavy, like she was right on the other side. I opened my mouth to call her name. My phone rang again. Out of pure anger, I answered, ready to shout at my neighbor for calling me right now, at this exact moment. But she spoke so fast, I didn't get a word out. "Ben," she said, voice shaking, "I don't know what's wrong, but you need to come over and get her, okay? We can talk about it later. It's okay." "Wait," I said, confused, trying to keep my voice low. "Hold on. I need to get June. I know," my neighbor interrupted. "You know," I whispered. "What do you mean, you know? I have her right here. I have her right here," my neighbor said, and the words hit me like a shove. She ran over to me. My throat tightened. "What? Dad?" June's voice cut through the air, close, right behind the door. The breathing stopped. My neighbor was still on the line, still talking, but I couldn't hear her anymore. All I could hear was my daughter's voice on the other side of that door, the way she said Dad, like she wasn't scared, like she was relieved, like she'd finally found me. "Dad, I'm sorry I broke it," June said, small and shaky. "I just wanted to clean it." Then fingers appeared. A small hand squeezed through a narrow crack between the door frame and the cave wall. The skin dragged against rock and wood until it split, and blood slid down the fingers. The hand pushed harder, trying to widen the gap. Then another hand appeared. Then another. Then another. Not two hands belonging to one child. More? Too many? Each one clawed into the splintered wood, pulling. The frame creaked like it was about to give. The sound filled the tunnel, deep and slow, like the mountain itself was groaning. "Dad?" June called again. My mouth went dry, my legs felt weak. "I'm here, honey," I managed. And my voice sounded wrong in that place, too loud and too thin. "It's okay." I stepped closer without deciding to, like my body had already made up its mind. My hand reached for the doorknob. "I'll be there in a second," I whispered. "Okay. Hang on." My fingers closed around cold metal, and in the silence between my heartbeat and the creaking wood, I realized I didn't know which June was behind that door. I didn't know if I was about to open it for my daughter, or if I was about to let something else into the world wearing her voice. Story 6. The house I bought out by the lake had an uncanny charm. The wind wailed at the windows at night, and the floorboards complained every time I put my weight on them. The air inside carried this sweet mix of old paper and caramel, like forgotten books and burnt sugar had soaked into the walls over the years. 2 steps leading up to the little porch were rotten, but I told myself it would be an easy fix once I got settled. The best part of the property was the lake. It was a wide bowl of greenish-blue water that rippled all day and turned glassy at dusk. From the dock, you could see fish move under the surface, little flashes and shadows, life everywhere. It looked like something from a picture book. Peaceful. Quiet. A place that didn't care what the rest of the world was doing. That was the whole reason I bought it. I wanted seclusion. I wanted to get away from the static noise of my life, the constant feeling that everything was moving too fast and I was falling behind. My brain had been in a fog for months, and I kept catching myself circling thoughts I didn't want to follow all the way to the end. I'd lie awake thinking about eternity, about death, about the huge unknown waiting behind everything. And the dread would settle under my skin like a second heartbeat. I didn't have a place to calm down. I didn't have a place where my mind felt safe. So I spent what I had, bought the cabin, and drove an hour out of the city with the kind of hope that feels desperate when you admit it out loud. I didn't care that the house was old and needed work. I wanted something that could be mine, something I could rebuild. I moved in with almost nothing. A mattress, a few boxes. I turned on the water, gas, and electricity. The fridge was an old 1960s thing, dented and humming, and the stove looked like it had been scrubbed by people who didn't mind elbow grease. I was grateful for both. Appliances weren't in my budget. I wanted a washer and dryer, so I hired a crew to install a set in the closet where the floors had been repaired and the sliding doors still looked fresh compared to the rest of the place. Work became my anchor, exhausting but liberating. I focused on the foundation, wall repairs, and the brick chimney. The house felt like it almost breathed while I worked on it, like it was waking up under my hands. Once it was functional, I furnished it slowly. Thrift store finds in the living room, my mom's dining set that had been in storage for almost a decade, dishes and silverware ordered online. I made sure the mailman could find the long driveway. I told myself it felt like home, and I made one rule for myself: no TV. I wanted silence. I wanted to hear my own thoughts without them being covered by constant noise. I swapped my smartphone for a flip phone so I couldn't fall into endless scrolling and political arguing and doom headlines. When I said I wanted seclusion, I meant it, even from the news. I needed air. One early evening, after I bought a chair for the dock, I walked out to the end of the pier and sat down. The water stretched out in front of me in every direction, and the horizon looked like it was melting. Peach and crimson smeared together in the sky and reflected on the lake so perfectly, it felt like the sun was sinking into the water twice. I watched the light vanish under that glassy surface. I turned on the lantern at the end of the dock. Night came quickly. Sounds rose up from everywhere. Cicadas were the loudest, a constant buzzing chorus. Wind moved over the water and filled in the spaces. I sat sideways in the chair, trying to enjoy the feeling of being alone, without feeling lonely. Then the water in front of me began to quiver. Not normal ripples, not wind. It was one spot, tight and violent, like something big was turning under the surface. I slid off the chair and crawled closer to the edge. My hand braced on the damp wood. I leaned over and stared down. A fish's head broke through the water. At first it was just the top half, glossy and slick, pushing up through bubbles. I flinched hard, more startled than scared. Then I saw something else rise behind it, a thick ridge like a spine or a huge vertebra cresting the surface. Large eyes bulged out of its head, too big, too aware. I leaned in because curiosity is a reflex. Then the head rose fully out of the lake, and I jolted backward so fast I nearly fell off the dock. The fish had a human mouth, not like kind of human, not like a weird shape you could misinterpret. A real mouth with lips. It smiled at me with black gums and square teeth. "Hello," it said. The voice was polite, educated, calm, the kind of voice you'd expect from a man in a suit, not a thing that lived in a lake. My heart was hammering. "What are you?" I managed. "You have a lovely home," the creature said, and swam closer to the end of the dock. "How are you real?" I asked. My mind was firing questions too fast to speak. I couldn't decide whether I was hallucinating or witnessing something I wasn't supposed to see. "I'm just real, I suppose," it replied. "Just as you are." Then it lifted more of itself out of the water, and I saw human shoulders, slick and greenish, and then arms. Human arms with webbed hands. It propped itself on the dock like it belonged there. I recoiled, and it giggled. The sound had bubbles in it, like laughter trapped in gills. "You don't have to be afraid of me," it said. "I'm just curious. Aren't you curious about me?" The way it asked made my skin crawl, like it knew the answer and wanted to hear me admit it. I tried to steady my voice. "What do you want?" "Just a conversation," it said, innocent, as if it wasn't a nightmare on my dock. "I have to go," I said quickly. getting to my feet. I backed away without turning around because I didn't want to lose sight of it. Maybe some other time. I understand, it replied. Maybe later then. And then it slipped back under the surface and disappeared like it had never been there. I ran back to the house. I told myself it was a lucid nightmare. Exhaustion, isolation, too much silence making my brain create something to fill it. I'd been overworked, stretched thin, mentally frayed. It made sense that my mind would snap in a strange direction. That night, I dreamed of it anyway, of the fish man calling to me in whispers, promising wonder, promising a life that felt larger than my anxious little thoughts. I woke up sweaty and weirdly energized, like my body had mistaken fear for excitement. All day, I kept wanting to go back to the dock. I fought the urge because I didn't want to feed the delusion, if that's what it was. I forced myself into chores instead. I went through financial spreadsheets, tried to make my limited income stretch while I was on unpaid leave. I made business calls, sent emails, tried to act like a person with control over his life. That night I showered, sat on the couch with a whiskey, and let the house be quiet around me. Then I heard splashing at the dock. I looked through the window and saw the lantern still on from last night. And beneath it, half a body sprawled on the dock. It was there again. I stared, numb with disbelief. Then I tried to ignore it, which felt ridiculous. I walked around my own living room, pretending I wasn't sharing property with something impossible. I browsed my books, flipped through vinyl, poured another drink. From outside, faint giggles drifted in, and it made the house feel smaller, like I was being watched from the dark. I paced. I drank more. I sat on the porch and tried not to look at the dock, but my eyes kept cutting back anyway. It waved at me. Something in me broke, or maybe softened, tipsy and frustrated. I walked down to the dock like I was ending an argument with myself. I sat cross-legged a foot or two away from the creature and forced myself to look at it properly. Its fingers were long, webbed and coated in thick slime. Its skin was pale green and clammy. Gills along its neck flared. The fins around its head jerked in odd little movements, and a ridged fin on top of its head flexed like a blade. People haven't lived in that house for some time, it said casually, like it was starting small talk. I stared at its eyes. They were too round, too wet, too human in the way they watched me. The last owners left one day and were never seen again, it continued. I was alone during that time. But now you are here. It tilted its head in quick jerks. I need a friend. It waited, as if it expected me to understand that need as something reasonable. I don't know what to say to you, I said finally. I don't even know what you are. I laughed too loud, a burst that sounded wrong in the quiet. Should it matter what I am? It asked. Would it matter if I were a liberal and you were a Republican? Would it matter if I had thoughts you didn't agree with? Would that keep us from being friends? Its eyelids, if you could call them that, slid over its bulging eyes in a quick, wet sweep, then snapped back. You're not just different, I said, trying to make logic sound like protection. You're a creature. You're not human. This is beyond politics, beyond ethnicity. You're a different species. It watched me like I was disappointing it. What? Because of the way I look? It said. Would you judge a handicap? Are you that shallow? It's not a handicap, I snapped. It's unnatural. Who decides what is natural? It asked, and it laughed again like my words were childish. Who's to say you aren't the alien and I'm the superior being? My stomach rolled. I need another drink. I got up and stumbled back to the house, found the couch, and passed out hard. I woke late with a headache that felt like punishment. The air in the cabin smelled like old wood and coffee grounds. I sat up slowly, and the memory of the creature hit me like a punch. It wanted to be friends, and once that thought formed, another followed behind it, quieter and worse. What was really stopping me? It hadn't attacked me. It hadn't tried to break into the house. It hadn't hurt me. It just wanted companionship. And I was out here alone, living in silence because my own thoughts were too loud. Maybe talking to something, anything, would actually help. I made coffee the slow way, grinding beans, pouring boiling water over a makeshift filter, drinking it black. Then I carried the whole glass decanter and a mug down to the dock like I'd decided this was normal now. I dozed in the afternoon sun until a splash woke me. The fishman hauled its upper body onto the dock again. Couldn't stay away, it asked, and the laugh in its voice sounded smug. I suppose not, I said, and surprised myself by matching its tone. And yet you're here too. Fair, it said. The weather's fair. You should come swim with me. I saw its legs for the first time then, green, long-webbed feet paddling behind it like it could shift between shapes without effort. I'm not much of a swimmer, I said quickly. Suit yourself, it replied. But the water is more than fair. Wouldn't you like to at least feel it? The insistence made me uncomfortable, so I changed the subject. Were you close to the last owners? Very close, it said. And for a moment it sounded almost dreamy. Michael used to swim with me all the time. I'm Seth, I said, like I was introducing myself at a barbecue instead of to a nightmare creature. I'm Marlin, it replied. Like the fish, I said, and laughed lightly because I didn't know what else to do. Like the fish, it laughed back. And for a moment, it felt almost easy. Like we'd laughed together 100 times. We stayed on the dock, talking until sunset, until the lake swallowed the last of the orange light. Marlin tried again to convince me to swim. I refused again. We made a plan to talk tomorrow like we were friends. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling thinking about the universe. If Marlin existed, what else existed? What else was hiding in the dark corners of the world, waiting for someone lonely enough to notice? The next morning, Marlin was already there. It's a beautiful morning. Pony, it said, floating on its back so the sun gleamed off its scaled torso. It flapped its webbed feet and circled to show off how comfortable the water was. We should swim together. Maybe another time, I said, sipping coffee and watching the gills along its ribs open and close like fleshy shutters. It sighed and swam in circles while we talked. Politics came up somehow. Marlin knew too much about the government, about systems, about how power shifts over time. We argued about socialism and productivity, about what happens when rights get stripped away, about what it would feel like if people stopped being free to be who they wanted. We could talk for hours. It felt good to talk. It felt like my mind had finally found something to hold on to besides dread. I started bringing an extra mug down with sugar and cream so Marlin could try coffee. It said it was bitter, but liked the warmth. It described the taste like it understood comfort. I began to trust it. That was the mistake. There was a day when I felt secure enough that I packed my swimming gear, just in case. I told myself it would make Marlin happy. I told myself I was being open-minded. I told myself fear was just ignorance. Marlin asked as soon as it saw the bag. "Would you like to swim with me today?" it said, almost bouncing in the water. "I'm desperate for a partner." I hesitated, then said yes. It leapt up in a smooth arch and splashed back down, ecstatic. I laughed, nervous but real. I got into the water. The lake was cold at first, then it wrapped around me and became bearable. I kicked slowly, staying close to the dock. Marlin was instantly beside me. Up close, it was bigger than I'd fully understood. Its limbs were long and thin, too long for its torso, and its eyes watched me constantly, flicking over my face like it was checking something. It smiled, and the human grin stretched too far, corners pulling under its eyes. It was still horrifying, even after all the talking. Then it came closer and put its hands around my neck. I tried to pull back, but it held me, and with one strong motion, it dragged me under. Water rushed into my mouth and nose. Panic exploded. I fought, flailing, but Marlin's grip was unbreakable. Then something changed. The water stopped feeling like drowning. It felt breathable. Not natural, but possible. My throat opened and the lake filled me, and my body accepted it, like it had been waiting. I grabbed my neck and felt something new under my fingers. Flaps on either side, opening and closing. Gills. Marlin's webbed fingers moved to my ribs, pressing along my chest, and I felt a sharp snap as if something inside me shifted out of place to make room. Pressure bloomed and then eased as my body reorganized itself around those new gills. "Isn't that nice?" Marlin said, circling like it was proud. I was breathing underwater. I couldn't speak properly. My words came out in bubbles and garbled noise, but Marlin understood anyway. It led me deeper, down into darker water where old junk sat on the bottom. Things thrown in over the years. We swam through schools of fish that didn't fear me anymore. They mistook me for one of their own. It should have felt magical. It did for a while. Then I tried to go back up. I lingered under the dock, expecting Marlin to take the gills away, to give me back my lungs, to let me climb out and breathe air again. Marlin just stared at me. "I've given you a gift," it said. "Wouldn't you say so?" "I suppose," I managed, words broken in the water. "I think I deserve a gift in return," Marlin said, and the smile returned. Wider, hungrier. "What do you want?" My body floated backward on instinct, but it was useless. "I want your lungs." The sentence hit me harder than any physical blow. "Please," I tried to say, choking on bubbles. "Change me back. I don't want this." Marlin caught me easily. It pulled me close enough that its mouth was beside my ear. "So I can breathe on land," it said. Calm, like it was explaining a fair trade. "Don't worry. I'll give them back as soon as they stop working for me. But then you'll end up like Michael and the woman before him. Rotten, trapped, lost to life, and never seen again." I tried to swim away. It didn't matter. Marlin was faster. "Give them to me with your blessing," it hissed. "It will be a more honorable death." I bit and scratched and fought, but the creature didn't care. Its grip tightened. Its voice stayed polite, almost disappointed. I didn't want to do this, it said, but you've left me with no choice. Now that you have gills, you will continue to live in the lake. And I will visit you, of course, so you won't be alone. Then it reached into my chest. I felt the invasion like fire and pressure and tearing pain I can't put into normal words. It was too intimate, too impossible. Its hand went inside me as if my ribs were nothing, and it pulled. My lungs came out whole. I watched it happen, like my mind couldn't accept the image. I watched Marlin swallow them, and through its translucent underbelly I saw the pale mass of them settle inside, blending with other organs that didn't look human either. Marlin kicked away from me and surged toward the surface. I grabbed for it without a plan, without logic. I couldn't drown a fish. I knew that. I just wanted to stop it, to keep it from walking into my life wearing my breath. Marlin kicked me in the head. The impact sent me into a hot, spinning daze. By the time my vision steadied, it was gone. I saw it climb onto the dock and move toward the path to my house. I forced myself up after it. I lifted my body out of the water and instantly regretted it. Without lungs, my chest didn't pull in air. The gills flared uselessly in open air, flapping like a dying thing. I collapsed back into the lake, choking on nothing, and watched from the water as Marlin walked into my house, into my sanctuary, into the life I built to escape my mind. I stayed in the lake for days, drifting and hiding. I began to see things under the surface that made my stomach turn, shapes that weren't rocks, bodies that had been down there too long, mummified remains lodged between weeds and old debris. People Marlin had taken, just as it promised. And the longer I stayed, the more my own body began to change. My skin became slick and green. My eyes spread wider apart. They started to bulge painfully, as if my skull was reshaping to fit them. The lake was rewriting me the way Marlin had rewritten itself. Every night I swam to the end of the dock and cried out, voice muffled and ugly, hoping it would hear me, hoping it would end it. But Marlin was too busy living my life, too busy enjoying land and warmth and walls and books and coffee and everything it could never have without stealing. I understood then what it had done. It didn't want a friend. It wanted an exit. And I was the door. Now I float on my back and let the current carry me. I have nothing but thoughts, and the lake is endless enough to match them. I can feel myself turning into something that belongs here, something that won't be able to climb out even if it tries. But I'm waiting. When Marlin's stolen lungs finally fail, age, sickness, whatever, makes human parts stop working, it will come back to the water. It will need something else. It will need the lake again. And when it does, I'll be ready. All I have to do is wait for it to come home. Story 7. I've always liked darkness. When I came home from school, I'd switch off the lights without thinking. I'd take my phone, lie down on my bed, and stay there for hours. Nothing felt better than that. The room would go quiet. The corners would disappear. The world would shrink to one small, glowing screen in my hands. And everything outside it would stop mattering. Even when my friends called, I made excuses. I'd tell them I was tired, or busy, or that my parents wanted me to do something. Most of the time, I just didn't want to talk. I didn't want to sit outside in the light and hear people's voices and pretend I was interested in the things they were interested in. In the dark, I didn't have to perform. Still, I had school. I had exams. I had to wake up in the morning. Life kept moving even if I tried to hide from it. Then the pandemic happened. School shut down. Classes moved online. I barely attended. At first, I blamed the connection. Then I blamed headaches. Then I stopped blaming anything at all. My friends lived far away, and during the lockdown, there was no meeting anyone. My tuition, sir, couldn't come either. Suddenly, all the structure that used to pull me out of my bed was gone, and my world shrank even more. My days turned into a loop of darkness and a glowing phone screen. I would wake up and grab my phone instantly, before my mind even fully opened. I didn't brush my teeth first. I didn't even sit up properly. I just reached for it like it was the only thing that mattered. Slowly, my life stopped being about time. It became about notifications, followers, likes, messages, videos, scrolling until my eyes burned, and then scrolling more anyway. I stopped checking the clock because it didn't help. Morning and night felt the same if the lights stayed off. I'd lose entire hours without noticing. Sometimes I'd look up and realize it was evening, or midnight, or early morning again. And I'd feel nothing except the urge to keep going.
Bathing only happened when my mother yelled long enough that I couldn't ignore her. Eating happened when the phone battery dropped low and I needed to plug it in, and even then, I'd carry it with me like a piece of my body. I'd sit with a plate in front of me and scroll with one hand, chewing without tasting anything. Food became background noise like the hum of a fan.
My parents complained every day. Let the phone rest, they said. Stop living in darkness. Let some light in. I understood why they hated the phone part. They said I was wasting time, wasting my brain, becoming lazy. I heard all of that. But I never understood what was wrong with darkness. It wasn't hurting anyone. I wasn't doing any work that required light. I wasn't painting or reading books or cleaning. I didn't need brightness. Darkness felt safe. It felt like hiding under a blanket. They warned me anyway. They said staying in the dark and staring at the screen would ruin my eyesight. They were right, and a part of me knew it, but I didn't care. It's only until the pandemic ends, I told myself, like saying it made it true. Like the pandemic was a short storm that would pass quickly. I didn't realize it would stretch on and on until temporary became a way of living. My habits got worse without me noticing. I watched my phone while eating. I watched it while brushing my teeth. I watched it while my mother talked to me. I watched it even while it charged, leaning close to the wall socket, with the cable stretched tight, neck bent, eyes fixed on the screen, like if I looked away for even a minute, something important would happen without me. Sometimes I'd lie in bed with the charger plugged in and my phone balanced on my chest. If it slipped off and hit the mattress, I'd wake up immediately, heart pounding, like I'd been shaken by an alarm. Being an only child, I never faced real punishment. My parents scolded, threatened to take the phone away, then gave it back because it was the only thing that kept me quiet. Sometimes I wonder if that was its own curse. Not having anyone to compete with, not having to share attention, not having consequences that stuck. I got used to being allowed to drift. Over time, my body started to break down. It didn't happen all at once. It came in small signs I ignored until they piled up. My vision got blurry. The screen didn't look crisp anymore unless I held it closer. My eyes started hurting. Sometimes they'd water for no reason. Sometimes I'd blink hard and still feel like there was a thin film over them. Anxiety became normal. Not the obvious kind where you panic. More like a constant buzzing under my skin. My heart would speed up for no reason. My chest would feel tight in quiet moments. I'd zone out when people spoke to me. My parents would ask a question and I'd answer late, like I'd been pulled back from far away. My blood pressure went up. My weight followed. My body felt heavier, slower, like it was dragging itself through the day. Eventually, my parents forced me to see a doctor, and I got lenses. When I put them on, everything looked clearer again, but I didn't feel relieved the way I should have. It didn't feel like I'd fixed something. It felt like I'd paid a price, and the price still wasn't enough. I went straight back to the dark. After a year, I heard the pandemic might finally be lifted. People were talking about reopening, about returning to normal life. Schools would open. Markets would fill again. Everyone seemed hungry for daylight, like they'd been starving for it. That news should have pushed me to change. It should have made me sit up and think, okay, now I need to rebuild myself. Now I need to stop. Instead, something darker happened inside my head. I took it as permission. Like the end was coming, and I should enjoy the last stretch of my habits before reality returned. It's my last chance, I told myself, and I went deeper. I stayed in darkness longer. I ignored meals more. I stopped even pretending to join online classes. I scrolled late into the night until my eyelids felt thick and painful. And then I scrolled more because stopping felt worse than exhaustion. A week later, I had a strange dream. In the dream, all I saw was my phone. Not just using it. Not just holding it. The phone filled my whole vision, bright and close, like it was the only object in the universe. The screen kept changing, flashing images and text and colors, but none of it made sense. It was like my mind was scrolling even in sleep. When I woke up, everything was still dark. At first, I thought I'd slept too long, and it was still night. I blinked. I rubbed my eyes. I shifted in bed, expecting my eyes to adjust. Nothing changed. I wasn't seeing darkness the way you see darkness when the lights are off. I wasn't seeing anything. I sat up so fast my head spun. I held my hand in front of my face and waved it. Nothing. That's when the truth landed, heavy and slow. I was blind, but it wasn't just blindness. When I closed my eyes, the smartphone display appeared in my vision anyway. Bright, clear, perfectly sharp, like it was burned into the inside of my skull. The same glowing rectangle, the same moving images, the same shifting colors. It didn't fade. It didn't flicker. It stayed there like it was alive. I opened my eyes again, and there was nothing. I closed them, and the phone screen returned. That was when I screamed. My mother came running, her footsteps fast and panicked in the hallway. "What happened?" she shouted, grabbing my shoulders. "I can't see," I cried. "I can't see anything." "What?" Her voice changed immediately, like her body understood before her mind accepted it. I heard her breath catch. She started crying too, right there in my room, holding me like she could hold my eyes back into my head. I didn't tell her about the screen. I couldn't. If I told her that even when I closed my eyes, I could still see the phone glowing, she would panic in a way I didn't want to deal with. She would think I'd lost my mind. She'd call relatives. She'd talk to neighbors. She'd drag me to every temple and doctor in the city. She'd make it bigger and louder and more terrifying. So I kept that part hidden. Months have passed. The pandemic is gone. Everyone is returning to normal life. People complain about traffic again. People post pictures outside again. Schools reopen. Friends meet. The world moves forward like the nightmare ended. Except for me. My life has become something I don't recognize. Sleep doesn't come easily. When I try to rest, my body is tired, but my mind won't settle. And when I finally close my eyes, the phone screen appears again, bright, clear, like a punishment I built for myself. It glows behind my eyelids like I'm still staring into it. Sometimes I can even feel my thumb twitch like it wants to scroll, even though I can't see my hands anymore. When my friends came to meet me, they said I looked different. They didn't say it kindly. They didn't say it cruelly either. They said it the way people say something when they're trying not to be mean but can't lie. They said I looked disturbing. My eyes were puffy. The dark circles were huge. Acne scattered across skin that looked pale and tired. They said my posture looked like a zombie's, head bent forward, back crooked, stomach heavy like I'd been folded into myself for too long. I can't even argue with them. I can't see myself, but I can feel it. I can feel how my body holds itself, like it's still bent over a screen. Like it forgot how to stand straight in the world. The worst part is that the darkness I used to love doesn't feel safe anymore. Now it feels crowded. Because even when I'm blind, even when the room is black, there's still that glowing rectangle inside my head, bright as ever, reminding me that I didn't just live in darkness. I fed it until it became the only thing I could see. Story 8. When I was 16, my parents sent me to live with my grandparents for a month. I hadn't been there in years. My relationship with my parents was already tense, and they acted like sending me to the middle of nowhere would somehow fix it. Looking back, I think they just wanted space. They wanted quiet. They wanted me out of the house, whatever the reason. That month in the countryside didn't calm anything down. It changed my life in ways I still don't know how to explain without my stomach tightening. "Bye, sweetie. Behave," my mom called, waving out the window as her SUV pulled away and threw dust into the air. "Try to contain your excitement a little," I muttered, turning toward my grandparents. Grandma smiled so widely, it almost made me feel guilty for being annoyed. "Oh, Stephen, we're so happy you're staying with us," she said. Her warmth was real. It always had been. Pappy didn't speak right away. He stepped close and clamped a heavy hand on my shoulder. "She's right," he said. "We don't get many visitors." I forced a grin, even though my insides were screaming. "Happy to be here," I lied, hoping I sounded convincing. "Come on," Grandma said, ushering me inside. "I'll show you your room." The house looked exactly like I remembered. Old wood, old smells, old quiet. Everything neat, everything kept, everything slightly too still. When Grandma left me alone in the bedroom, the first thing I did was pull out my phone. No service. I checked again like the bars might come back if I stared hard enough. Nothing. I walked to the window and held it up like that would change anything. Still nothing. My grandparents were old school. They didn't have Wi-Fi either. It wasn't a no-password situation or a weak signal. There was just no internet in the house at all. It felt like being dropped into another decade, I went downstairs and found Pappy at the table with a crossword, the newspaper spread out like it was his shield from the world. "Hey, Pap?" I asked. He looked up once, just enough to show he'd heard me. The man was built like a refrigerator, thick arms, heavy shoulders, the kind of body that made you believe he'd never lost a fight in his life. He wasn't friendly the way Grandma was. He had a stern, no-nonsense presence, and even as a kid, I'd been a little afraid of him. In that moment, my question suddenly felt stupid. I said, "Do you have internet out here?" He stared at me for a beat, then nodded toward an ancient computer monitor on a desk in the corner. "That's all we got," he said. "No connection to it, though." My heart sank. I realized it was going to be a long month. 2 days later, boredom drove me down into the basement. It was the worst part of the house. Poor light, cobwebs, dust thick enough to write your name in. Everything smelled like damp wood and old cardboard. It wasn't inviting at all, which somehow made it more interesting when you had nothing else to do. I pulled the switch for the single bare bulb hanging from the ceiling, and the weak light flickered on. That's when I saw the door. A wooden door at the far end of the basement, set into the concrete wall like it didn't belong there. What really grabbed me was the note nailed to it. "Stay out. Pappy." It wasn't subtle. It wasn't a joke. It was obviously meant for me. And the second I read it, curiosity lit up in me like someone struck a match. I walked toward it slowly, my sneakers scuffing the dirt floor. It felt like I was doing something illegal, like I was stepping over a line I wouldn't be able to step back across. That feeling should have scared me off. Instead, it made me want to do it more. When I reached the door, my heart was pounding. I took a breath, reached for the knob, and twisted. Locked. Of course it was. I let out a frustrated breath, feeling foolish, and turned to go find something else to snoop through. Then I stopped. Someone was blocking my path. The air drained out of my lungs. Pappy stood between me and the stairs, shoulders filling the space like a wall. "What are you doing down here?" he said. It wasn't a question. I was just looking around," I replied, forcing a weak smile that probably looked like a grimace. He stared down at me, silent for a moment. His face didn't change, but the silence felt like pressure. Then he spoke again. "Get out," he said. "I don't want to see you down here again." "Yes, sir," I said quickly. I didn't need to be told twice. I squeezed past him and hurried up the stairs, feeling his stare on the back of my head the entire way. After that, I couldn't stop thinking about the door. Pappy was hiding something. That much was clear. If it was just a storage room, he wouldn't have nailed a warning to it. If it was something harmless, he wouldn't have looked at me like that. I knew I couldn't go back right away. Not after getting caught. I needed to wait until he was out of the house for long enough that I could check it safely. I decided I'd do it when he went to the store. Then an opportunity came sooner than I expected. That night, I woke up needing to pee. I was half asleep as I walked down the hall, did my business, then went to the kitchen for a glass of water. I drank it standing there in the dark, the house quiet except for the refrigerator humming. On my way back upstairs, I reached the top of the landing, and I heard something, a low rustling deeper in the house. I don't know why I didn't just go back to bed. I should have. But I paused at the top of the stairs and crouched down in the shadow where I couldn't be seen. Footsteps moved across the floorboards downstairs. Heavy steps, slow and deliberate. Pappy's shadow came into view in the kitchen doorway. He stopped for a moment, and my whole body went tense. It felt like he could sense me, like he could smell that I was awake and watching. I thought for sure he'd look up the stairs and catch me, but he didn't. He continued across the kitchen. Then I heard a door creak open, the basement door. My stomach dropped. He was going to the room. My heart started pounding so hard it felt like it would give me away. I waited a second, then crept down the stairs as quietly as I could. Every step felt too loud. Every board felt ready to scream under my weight. At the bottom, the basement door was open. A slice of light fell across the floor. I moved down the second set of steps and froze halfway, peering through the dimness. Pappy stood at the far end of the basement. He reached behind an old painting leaning against the wall and pulled out a key, rusted and dark. He slid it into the lock of the forbidden door. The door opened. Light spilled from inside the room, and for a brief second, in that flash of brightness, I could have sworn I saw red on the floor. Not rust, not paint, something darker. I backed up quietly and returned to bed, but I didn't sleep. I just lay there, staring into the dark, trying to convince myself my eyes had played tricks on me. By morning, the curiosity was eating through me like an animal. I knew where the key was. I knew how he got in. But I couldn't risk going down at night. He surprised me once already. I didn't want to find out what would happen if he caught me again. So I waited. I waited until Pappy went to the store. "Going to get milk," he grunted, grabbing his keys from the hook by the door. "Okay, be safe," Grandma called from the kitchen, focused on the pie she was making. That was it. My chance. I set down the newspaper I'd been pretending to read and slipped toward the basement door. I opened it slowly, wincing at every creak. Grandma didn't react. Either she didn't hear it or she didn't want to. I practically ran down the basement stairs. My hands were shaking as I moved the painting and grabbed the key. The note on the door was still there like a guard. "Stay out. Pappy." I stared at it for 1 second, then pushed the key into the lock and turned. The door opened. Nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. The floor was stained with dried blood, dark patches baked into the concrete like it had soaked in and never fully dried. To my right was a metal work table lined with tools, pliers, hacksaws, hammers, things you shouldn't see collected in one place unless someone is building something or destroying it. The tools were crusted with flaky red. At the far end of the room was a corkboard covered in newspaper clippings and photographs, missing persons, faces, names, dates. Some of the articles were yellowed and curled at the edges. Some looked newer. And then I looked to the left. That's what almost made me black out. A yellowed mattress sat in the corner, filthy and damp-looking. On top of it lay a body, a corpse, so thin it looked like it had been drained. Maggots moved in and out of the open mouth, the eyes any place they could. The eyes were wide open, and the mouth was stiff, frozen into a scream that would never end. The smell hit me like a punch. Rot and waste, and something sweet underneath it that made my stomach flip. I stumbled backward, trying not to vomit. That's when I heard the sound behind me. Click. The lock. I turned slowly. Pappy stood in the doorway with a 6-shooter pointed at me. "Pappy," I choked. "I thought you were at the store." "Forgot my wallet," he said. His face wasn't just angry. It was hateful. It was the kind of look that tells you there is no version of this where you talk your way out. He sighed like I was an inconvenience that had forced his hand. "You've seen too much, boy," he said. "I didn't want it to come to this, but you left me no choice." Pow! The gunshot was deafening in that small room. For a second, I felt nothing. The shock kept pain away, like my brain was trying to protect me. Then I looked down and saw blood spreading across my arm. Bright red, blooming fast. "Arnold!" Grandma shouted from upstairs. "What was that?" "Nothing," Pappy called back. "Ignore it." And to my horror, she did. No second question, no footsteps, no panic. I don't know if she believed him, or if she knew exactly what was happening and didn't want to interfere. Either option made my skin go cold. Pappy stepped closer, raised the gun toward my head, and cocked the hammer. "Your grandmother's going to be upset when she finds out," he said, voice flat. "But she'll get over it. Eventually." I refused to give him the satisfaction of begging. My body moved on instinct. Fight or flight finally kicked in at the one moment it needed to. I lunged forward. The second shot cracked through the air, and I felt it whip past my head like hot wind. I shoved Pappy hard enough that he stumbled. The gun clattered to the floor. I didn't stop to grab it. I ran. Up the stairs, into the hallway, into the foyer. My arm burned, but fear was louder than pain. I snatched Pappy's spare keys from the hook and sprinted for the front door. Behind me, I heard him coming. Heavy footsteps. Rage. "Get back here!" he shouted, and the sound filled the house like thunder. I burst outside and ran for his truck. I unlocked it with trembling hands, threw myself into the driver's seat, and jammed it into drive. Pappy appeared in the doorway just as I hit the gas. Crash. I ducked instinctively as the side mirror exploded. Glass sprayed. The bullet had hit it clean. He didn't fire again. He just stood there watching me. That same hateful stare, boring into my skull as I tore down the dirt road and didn't look back. I drove until I reached the nearest town. The bullet had only grazed me, thank God. My arm was bleeding, but it wasn't a life-threatening wound. I went straight to the police, shaking so badly I could barely speak. They listened, and whether they believed me at first or not didn't matter, because they went to the house. What they found there still haunts me. Both of my grandparents were dead when they arrived, and the gun was still warm in Pappy's hand when they found him. After the investigation, everything came out. The room, the corkboard, the tools, the missing persons. My grandfather was linked to 13 disappearances, and the police believed there could have been more. I spent years in therapy afterward, trying to feel normal again, trying to exist without listening for footsteps in the dark, trying to stop smelling that room in my dreams. Even now, a long time later, the thing I feel most often isn't anger. It's relief, because I made it out of that house alive.